Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Aileen O'Brien and Agriland beef specialist Breifne O'Brien. Well, we've nearly experienced every type of weather imaginable this January. We've already had a spell of bitterly cold and freezing weather earlier in the month, and now a new storm has hit us and it's a big one. Met Éowyn has issued several status red wind warnings, the most serious and most rare level of weather warning, associated with Storm Éowyn. And these remain in place as we're recording this morning on Friday. The authorities have said that the conditions will be very likely to be damaging, disruptive and dangerous to human life. Aisling, what have people woken up to this morning?
Yes, Charles. Well, Storm Éowyn has definitely been making its presence felt overnight right across the country. And as you said, continuing on this morning as well. Conditions very dangerous across the country overnight and into today. Just a little bit of trivia about the storm name. It's the fifth named storm of the season, named by the UK Met Office. And it actually derives from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Éowyn is actually a character in that trilogy, and the name roughly translates to horse lover or joy of the horse, and it is derived from an old Welsh name, and it's not too far removed either from Owen, I believe, as well. But aside from all the trivia, as I said, Éowyn has been making its presence known in this country. A record-breaking gust of 183 kilometres an hour recorded at Mace Head in County Galway. That weather station also reported the highest mean wind speed ever recorded in this country at 135 kilometres an hour. So unsurprisingly, we have seen a huge amount of damage. The ESB has said there's been unprecedented, widespread and extensive damage to our electricity infrastructure, with power outages nationwide now as of 8 o'clock on Friday morning, affecting over 700,000 homes, farms and businesses across the country. And the ESB is anticipating further significant outages as the storm tracks across the country. As you said, status level red warnings, the highest warning that Met Éowyn can issue, are going to gradually ease during the course of today, but that will be followed then by a status orange alert. And it doesn't look like the weather's going to be too great over the weekend, kind of a wet weekend ahead. But for now, I suppose the safety messages out there are for people to stay in place during the red warning. And look, when it is safe to go outside, if you do come across any fallen wires or damaged electricity poles or wires, make sure to contact ESB. Don't go anywhere near them because they could well be live and incredibly dangerous. And the ESB has said that its crews and contractors will be deployed when it's safe to do so. And they said, given the predicted nature of the damage to our infrastructure, it is likely that restoration of power in some areas could take a significant number of days, is what we're hearing. So that won't be great for a lot of families out there across the country who've only recovered from the snowfall that we had. And as you said, every type of weather been thrown at us in the early days of 2025. Now, as I said, many fallen trees, damage to infrastructure. We've, of course, the rogue trampolines blowing around as always, despite the warnings from authorities. And unfortunately, reports coming from my own county here in Kerry of 2 families who had to be evacuated from their homes overnight due to structural damage as well. Now, we're hearing from Uisce Éireann that there will be significant disruption to water supplies due to the widespread power outages. They said that maybe around 150 customers could be at risk of disruption to their water supply. However, the company has said that the majority of customers currently at the moment, as we're recording this just before 10 o'clock on Friday morning, should still have water due to storage in the reservoirs. Now, I suppose from a farming point of view, obviously farmers are being urged to take the utmost care and caution when going back out onto their yards. The Department of Agriculture has actually taken the decision to suspend all on-farm inspections today because of the storm. We've seen marts cancelled and I suppose milk collections have been impacted as well because of the status red warnings. But it is expected that they might get up and running as normal once those warnings are lifted and it's safe to get back out on the roads. And the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, the ICMSA, has urged what it's called community-minded farmers to take care and minimise personal risks during the storm. Dennis Drennan, the president of the association, said that farmers need to be absolutely focused on safety over the coming days. And he said that farmers should wait until the storm is over before turning their attention to properties or buildings. And he said just recently, I suppose, in the cold snap, we have seen where community-minded farmers are usually the first people to respond in extreme weather events in their localities, I suppose. And he said, while we're proud of that community spirit and commitment, we have to be mindful of our own safety and not feel pressurized to get out and start clearing away any damage or fallen trees before it's safe to do so. So I just think that just to keep that in mind as well. And look, if there is damage to the farm, just to go out when it's safe to do so as well today, Charles, and just to keep safety in mind at all times.
Yeah, that's absolutely vital, Aisling, that people, keep that to the forefront of their minds. But we've also had a metaphorical storm in the Dáil this week, which has, after a fashion, resulted in a new Taoiseach, new government and new Minister for Agriculture. Aisling, can you take us through the week's events?
Yes, well, after a false start on Wednesday when the storm clouds gathered firmly over Leinster House, Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin was yesterday elected Taoiseach to lead the new government in the 34th Dáil. The election of a Taoiseach and the appointment of the cabinet had been due to take place on Wednesday, but the proceedings had to be abandoned due to a row in the Dáil over speaking rights. And the angry scenes in Leinster House actually made headlines right across the globe. And the Dáil was adjourned on 4 separate occasions on Wednesday by the Ceann Comhairle Verona Murphy because tensions ran high, Charles, over the opposition's unhappiness at the speaking rights being afforded to 4 regional independent group TDs. I suppose the argument being made that they can't be supporting the government while also sitting on the opposition benches and getting opposition speaking time as well. There was also disagreement from the opposition about the Dáil not sitting again until February 5th while the new government ministers acquaint themselves with their portfolios. Now, it's actually the second time that Micheál Martin will hold the highest office in this country, replacing Fine Gael leader Simon Harris, who now takes up the role of Taoiseach. And under the new programme for government, Micheál Martin will hold the office of Taoiseach until November 16th, 2027, when the position will then rotate to the leader of Fine Gael, who of course is currently Simon Harris. So we're assuming that position will go to Simon Harris at that time. But again, a week is a long time in politics and 2027 is a long time away as well. So after the new Taoiseach was formally appointed to the office by President Michael D. Higgins, all focus, of course, then returned to Leinster House, where TDs were anxiously waiting by their phones, Charles, to see if they would get a seat in the new cabinet. And 15 ministerial portfolios, senior ministerial portfolios on offer, I should say, Fianna Fáil taking 8 of those and Fine Gael holding 7. Now, Charles, after much speculation and as had been widely anticipated, it was confirmed that a face very familiar to farmers in the last government, Martin Hayden, who of course was Minister of State in the last government in the Department of Agriculture, is set to step up as the new Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine. The Kildare South TD comes from a beef farm and was first elected back in 2011. Now, ahead of the official announcement, Martin Hayden was keeping very tight-lipped about all of the ministerial appointments, but he did tell Agriland what he expects to face the next Minister for Agriculture. Take a listen.
It's a very busy interim for whichever minister comes in next, but it's also a massive opportunity. And that opportunity is epitomised in the fact that in the second half of 2026, Ireland will have the presidency of the EU. And that will be a pivotal time in the negotiation of the next CAP, and the Irish Minister of Agriculture will lead those negotiations at that time.
Now, he's barely appointed into the top role in Agriculture House, but the asks are already coming of Martin Hayden. The president of the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, Sean McNamara, welcomed his appointment and said he looks forward to engaging with the new minister on what he said are the very pressing issues currently facing Irish agriculture. But he did warn that the scale of the challenges ahead cannot be underestimated. He pointed to Europe and domestic issues as well. And he said that Minister Hayden has to take a strong stand in Europe and make it clear that decisions putting food security and rural livelihoods at risk are unacceptable. Now, obviously, Martin Hayden replaces the outgoing Minister for Agriculture, Charlie McConalogue. Disappointment this week, Charles, for the Donegal Fianna Fáil TD, because he didn't actually retain a place at the cabinet table. It had been expected that he may hold on to a senior portfolio, but that didn't come to pass. Now, elsewhere, Deputy Noel Grealish is set to be appointed as Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture with responsibility for Newmarket development and food research. And the Galway West TD told Agriland this week that in his new role, he hopes to grow agricultural markets internationally.
But we cannot forget the agriculture. It implies tens of thousands of people, and it also exports billions of euro worth of exports. And I think that has a sense to be forgotten about in the whole context of everything. So by being a super junior with that responsibility and having a seat at cabinet, I hope to grow that market and really put agriculture, food produce there on the world trade market.
Now, joining them in the Department of Agriculture will be independent TD for Kerry, Michael Healy-Rae, who along with his brother Danny has agreed to support the new government. And he has said that the next government has to work to grow Ireland's forestry industry and support stakeholders in doing so. Under his remit, he will have responsibility for forestry, we understand, horticulture and farm safety. And he told us this week that farmers are actually the real Green Party.
When it comes to the environment and when it comes to climate and all of that, I want to get rid of this thing that farmers are a problem. Farmers are the solution. The farmers of Ireland are the custodians of the land. I've never seen a farmer, a man or a lady or a family, I've never seen them take the farm with them. We will all die. What we have with the bits of land we have, some of us have worse land than others, right? But what we try to do is we try to improve it, we try to nurture it. If we inherit it, if we buy it, we keep it, we do the best we can with it, and we pass it on to the next generation. Very little land in Ireland sells, very, very little. It's part of yourself and the piece of ground you have, and even if it's bad ground, even if it's a marginal hill, you're very proud of it. And from an environmental point of view, what are you trying to do all the time? You're trying to make it better. You're trying to make a living out of it and then pass it on. So farmers are the solution to the climate. Farmers are terribly important. They're the real custodians of the environment. They're the real Green Party, if you wouldn't mind me using that phrase.
Now, Charles, just in terms of some other cabinet appointments which would be of interest to farmers, Darragh O'Brien will be Minister for Climate, Environment and Energy, along with having responsibility for transport as well. Darragh Cleary, who of course famously was the Agriculture Minister for a very short time before the infamous Golfgate incident, he is going to be the new Minister for Social Protection, but also Minister for Rural and Community Development and the Gaeltacht. And James Brown has been appointed as the Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage, which of course plays a role in Ireland's nitrates derogation as well, and the implementation of the nitrates programme. So I suppose before the election of a new Taoiseach and the appointment of that cabinet, we of course had the programme for government, and reaction to that document is continuing. Farm organisations welcomed aspects of the programme, but they have pointed to the lack of detail, saying it's a bit aspirational and we have no actual hard figures in it. And that was echoed this week by Independent Ireland TD Michael Fitzmaurice, who said that farmers need clarity on the new programme for government to see where they're going for the next 5 years. And he said what's needed now is a Department of Agriculture that charts a plan for the next 5 years with a clear path. And he said there are many challenges ahead, including delayed acres payments and new regulations, which he said will wreak havoc for farmers on marginal peaty land.
These farmers need to know where they are going for the next 5 years. We need clarity. We need now a Department of Agriculture that sets out their stall for 5 years and has a very clear path forward, not things changing day by day. And on top of that, the first thing that's coming in the door in the next week or two is the regulation in relation to 0.2 of a hectare of peatland. That, if this minister signs it, there's a lot of farmers in the Midlands, in the West, in the Northwest and in the South that's going to be in real trouble.
And that was Michael Fitzmaurice there. Well, while all that was going on this week, Ireland also hosted the new European Commissioner for Agriculture, Christoph Hansen, who's been in that job since November. Unfortunately, because of the way things panned out in the Dáil, there was no opportunity for him to have an official meeting with any Taoiseach or Minister for Agriculture. But he was in at the AGM of the Irish Farmers Association, which was held this week. Aisling, were there any notable outworkings from the Commissioner's contribution to the AGM?
Yes, Charles. So the EU Commissioner for Agriculture was actually greeted with a round of applause and a standing ovation initially at the IFA AGM, which of course marked the 70th anniversary of the association as well. Quite the coup for the IFA to get the new Commissioner over to Ireland. It's the first time he's visited the country in his new role. And the IFA President, Francie Gorman, in his speech to the Commissioner, highlighted some of the key concerns facing farmers in this country, including the new Common Agricultural Policy and how it will be structured. He emphasised that funding for environmental asks of farmers needs to be funded from outside of the CAP. He also said that Pillar 2 policies must support income and deliver a return for farmers. He spoke about the need to encourage young people into farming by ensuring that there's a decent standard of living. And he also raised, of course, the controversial EU-Mercosur trade deal, which was the subject of another protest by farmers in Europe this week. And of course, Francie Gorman raised Ireland's nitrates derogation too with the Commissioner.
It's hugely important that we hold on to it. Irish farmers, industry, together, we have come with a common plan. Farmers are working to improve water quality. And with their attention to the derogation, I can assure you that farmers will continue to do that into the future.
Now, Christoph Hansen hails from Luxembourg and actually comes from a farm himself. And ahead of the IFA AGM, the Commissioner was brought on a visit to a farm in County Kildare. And he joked at the IFA AGM that he obviously should have been accompanied by the Minister for Agriculture, but he said that obviously wasn't possible given the goings on in Leinster House, as you said, Charles. Now, during that visit, the Commissioner discussed a number of issues on the farm, from animal welfare to breeding strategy, hygiene, soil fertility, the use of slurry and soiled water, and of course, all of the paperwork that farmers face on a daily basis as well. And in his speech, Christoph Hansen said he wants to be a boots on the ground commissioner and he wants to see farmers on the ground and not from behind a desk in Brussels. He said he wants to learn more about farming practices across Europe because he said you can't compare farming in Ireland to the farming practices that might be carried out in the likes of Greece. And he said there is no agriculture without a healthy environment and we don't have to pit one against the other. Now, in terms of the next CAP and the Vision for Agriculture document, which he is working on at the moment, he told us it's not going to be a very extensive document. That Vision for Agriculture may be running to 10 or 15 pages. It's all part, of course, as the moves from the EU Commission to tackle the red tape and bureaucracy in farming. Hansen did acknowledge that farmers don't choose the job for the paperwork, Charles. He said that is something that the Commission really does have to work on. So he did acknowledge that, and that might come as a relief to farmers as they face mountains of paperwork every day in their jobs currently. Now, he said the farming community is the first victim of climate change and it's the first victim of biodiversity loss. But he said that the farming community is also the best ally to protect biodiversity. He also highlighted issues of generational renewal. That is something the Commissioner is very strong about. And he said that there has to be a sustainable future for farming, not just environmentally, but also from an economic perspective as well. Now, there was a question and answer session held at the IFA AGM. And the issue of non-farmers purchasing agricultural land was actually raised during that session. And the Commissioner noted that in his own country of Luxembourg, this is an issue as well. And he says that non-farmers buying land are quite inventive in how they get public support for that. And he noted that in these cases, the people are getting support. They're not an active farmer and not a productive farmer. And he added that he thinks we have to look at that. And in an exclusive interview with Agriland journalist Louise Hickey, Commissioner Hansen said that he does remain committed to supporting and saving average family farms in Ireland. And on the Mercosur deal, the Commissioner said it would be important for the EU to work on reciprocity in general when speaking about trade. And he said when we're producing to very high standards here in the EU, that has to be enforced for better for products that are coming into the EU. Have a listen.
I think this is really something where we have to see the ground, and that's what I did to do. I went to see a farm that a generational farm, let's say, because it's 3 generations on one farm that recently invested, that has a very sustainable production when it comes as well to animal welfare. This is exactly the kind of farms I think we need to support better, and to see how we can as well find solutions when it comes to the negative externalities of agriculture production.
So yesterday, the president of the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, the ICMSA, Dennis Drennan, met with EU Commissioner for Agriculture, Christoph Hansen, as well. During that meeting, he urged the Commissioner to ban below-cost selling of food across the EU. And he did welcome positive comments made by the Commissioner since his appointment, particularly on the need to work collaboratively in a manner that focuses on farm incomes. But he did say that farmers would await with much interest and anticipation the publication of the Commissioner's plan for the agriculture sector. And Drennan said that that plan has to move past the usual well-worn expressions of understanding and sympathy into real action and policy. So the Commissioner left Ireland yesterday, Charles, but he did say he will pay another visit soon to Ireland once the new Minister for Agriculture has been elected. So hopefully we'll see him back on our shores very soon. A lot of issues raised by the farm organisations with him yesterday and on farm in Kildare.
Moving on now, and Bord Bia's meat marketing seminar was held on Friday of last week. This is an annual event where meat industry stakeholders from across Ireland gather along with expert speakers to analyse the previous year and outline some of the key challenges and opportunities for the Irish meat industry for the coming year. Breifne, you were at that event for us. So what did you learn about the prospects and challenges for the beef sector into 2025?
So at the meat marketing seminar last week, the Bord Bia beef sector manager Mark Zieg highlighted that beef supplies are expected to fall by 5% or approximately 87,000 head this year. So Mark Zieg said that in 2024, the total beef kill stood at approximately 1.8 million head, which was 22,000 head or 1% up on the 2023 kill numbers. The increase last year came from a rise of 3,000 head in the prime kill, a rise of 29,000 head in the cow kill, and a drop of 9,000 head in the other category. So the increase last year came from a rise of 3,000 head in the prime kill, a rise of 29,000 head in the cow kill, and a drop of 9,000 head in the other category, i.e. veal and bulls over 24 months. Looking to 2025, Mark Zieg said that the supply of prime cattle is forecast to drop by 64,000 head, with a drop of 8,000 head forecast in the cow category this year and a further drop of 15,000 head forecast in the other category. Supplies are forecast to drop by 8% and 7% in the first and second quarters of 2025 respectively, followed by a less severe 1% and 2% in the final 2 quarters of this year. Zieg also outlined that the average carcass weights declined across all categories in 2024, which will come as little surprise to many beef farmers, as of course we all know carcass weights were back this year. But the average heifer carcass weight fell by 6.3 kgs. The average steer carcass weight fell by something similar, approximately 6 kilos, with young bulls and cows back by 2.6 and 3.4 kgs respectively. So while the average carcass weights fell, the average grades also declined in 2024, with 71% of cows grading a P, 18% of cows grading an O, and 10% of cows grading an OR in 2024. Looking at the 2024 steer kill, half the steers graded an O, 28% graded an OR, and 10% graded a U. So just looking at prices then this week, I suppose prices are in a very positive position at the moment in the beef sector. Flat price deals are available up as high as $6.35 a kilo for Angus cattle have been reported. Heifers have been quoted at $5.90 to $95 on the grid. Some processors are slightly behind this, but most procurement staff would acknowledge that the higher rates are having to be paid to secure cattle in most cases. Steers have been quoted at $5.80 to $5.85 on the grid, with lower price offerings also out there at the moment in some cases.
And as well as that, Breifne, the meat marketing seminar also covered the sheep sector. So what are some of the points of interest and concern there?
So on the sheep meat sector at the meat marketing seminar last week, Seamus McMenamin said that the start of the season is looking like tight supplies and firm prices, with the caveat of increased competition from sheep meat from countries like Australia and New Zealand as they come into Europe and the UK. But despite this, I suppose McMenamin did highlight that tight supplies and strong prices are forecast to dominate the lamb trade in the short term at least. On the lamb trade currently, McMenamin said the quotes are at over €9 a kilo at the moment, and it does leave it very hard, he noted, for Irish sheep meat to compete in terms of international product. Despite this, he noted that we are at the advantage of a significant tightening of sheep meat supplies in Europe and somewhat stable demand, so that does help the case. Now, farmers will know that lamb prices are back slightly this week. So, in a presentation at the Meat Marketing Seminar on Sheep Meat Exports in 2024, McMiniman noted that the value of Irish sheep meat exports actually fell by €400 million or 6%, and the volume fell by 56,000 tonnes or 23%. In 2024, the total sheep kill was 2.5 million, with the hogget kill falling by 73,000 head. The lamb kill fell by 240,000 head, and the Éowyn ram kill dropped by 65,000 head.
Thanks for that, Breifne. Switching over to the dairy sector now, and if you listened to last week's podcast, you'll know that there is an ongoing disagreement at the moment between members and management of Dairygold Co-op. Aisling, can you just remind us of the issue here and take us up to speed with developments this week?
Yes, so management at Dairygold held further meetings this week to discuss concerns around the proposed changes to the co-op's loyalty scheme. And on Sunday, actually, the Dairygold chairperson, Pat Clancy, the vice chair, Donal Shinnick, and the chief executive, Michael Hart, met with a group of milk suppliers in Dairygold headquarters in Mitchellstown. That group included Niall Toomey, Ned O'Keefe, Owen Burke, Tig McSweeney, and Nigel Sweetenham. The milk suppliers relayed a number of concerns raised during a meeting that we spoke about last week on the podcast that was held in the Firgrove Hotel in Mitchellstown. And they called for the conditions around the loyalty bonus to be scrapped. And following that meeting, a demonstration by the milk suppliers had been planned to take place on Monday of this week outside Dairygold headquarters. But that was postponed to allow the meetings take place this week by Dairygold with their regional committees, and the milk suppliers said they would see what the outcome of that was. So last night, the board of Dairygold issued a statement and they confirmed that it has decided to amend the co-op's updated loyalty reward scheme. And the Cork Co-op said following consultations with its regional committees, the board decided to amend the mechanism through which eligible members and customers may be awarded a potential year-end trading payment. They said in any year where such payments might apply, recipients will be rewarded for their direct trading activity in the form of a loyalty reward scheme top-up payment. They said it was also decided that any future potential year-end milk payments to milk suppliers will not be linked to their level of purchases with the society, and the previously proposed 6 cent a litre threshold will not now apply. They said that all other elements relating to the loyalty reward scheme will remain in place, and they confirmed that it will amend its loyalty reward scheme to reflect the board's decision, and it will communicate the amendment to its members shortly. Now, the Co-op said since the loyalty reward scheme was first introduced in 2015, more than €21 million has been paid out to members and customers in shares and cash. Now, the Co-op said since the loyalty reward scheme was first introduced in 2015, over €21 million has been paid out to members and customers in shares and cash. And the chair of Dairygold, Pat Clancy, in that statement said that the Co-op is committed to its everyday goal of maximising members' income through ensuring the society pays the strongest possible milk and grain prices and minimising their input costs. He said that Dairygold has a policy of rewarding members who actively trade with the society, which helps to support the overall business performance. And he said the focus of the initial updated scheme was to increase the rewards that they pay to those actively trading. But he said when it became apparent that members were concerned over the change, which links potential year-end milk payments to the level of purchases, they re-engaged with their regional committees, focus groups and members. And he said following this consultation, the board decided to amend the scheme. So we'll have to wait and see, Charles, if that move allays the concerns that were raised by those milk suppliers.
Thanks for that update, Aisling. And just before we move on from the dairy side of the house, we'll just let you know that Tirlán held an online briefing for its suppliers and shareholders this week, in which the Co-op's chairperson, John Murphy, indicated that feed and fertiliser prices are expected to rise in 2025. Meanwhile, another processor, Arrivo, held the first of its Your Farm, Your Future events, at which Arrivo CEO Donald Tierney examined key issues in relation to the global markets. saying that there is a growing demand for dairy globally, and while there are challenges for the sector, such as environmental legislation and geopolitical relationships, there is also opportunity in the medium and long term for Irish dairy. You can read about the comments from both Tyrlon's John Murphy and Arrivo's Donald Tierney on Agriland.ie and the Agriland app. And just to round out this dairy update, the Global Dairy Trade Index saw an improvement this week, increasing by 1.4% after the second GDT trading event of 2025 this week. That came as several Irish processors finalised their prices for December milk, as well as, in some cases, end-of-year and seasonality payments. But moving on, and Aisling, you had an interesting story this week on entitlements, which is always an interesting and important topic for farmers. What did you find out?
Yes, Charles, some good news for farmers to finish up the podcast this week. The Department of Agriculture has confirmed to us in Agriland that the clawback on entitlements will not be reinstated for the 2025 scheme year. So essentially, those who sell entitlements without land this year will continue to see the full amount transferred to the purchaser. Under Ireland's CAP strategic plan, the clawback on entitlements was lifted for 2023 and 2024. And the plan states that the sale of entitlements without land would be subject to a clawback of 20% in 2026 and in 2027. So that means that 20% of the number of entitlements sold without land in those years will be relinquished to the National Reserve. So, for example, in the event that a seller sells 50 entitlements worth €50 each, the buyer receives 40 entitlements at €100 each, while 10 entitlements then would be relinquished to the National Reserve. But as I said, not this year. That will come into force in 2026 as things currently stand. Now, to be considered as a sale of entitlements with land, 1 hectare of land must be sold per entitlement, and the clawback will only apply to the portion of the entitlements not supported by land. And the CAP strategic plan outlines that the primary objective of this rule is to support active farmers, and it said by removing the clawback on sales of entitlements, it should encourage permanent transfer of entitlements to active farmers. So some positive news there for this scheme year.
Thanks, Aisling. And that just about brings us to the end of this week's podcast. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Breifne and myself, mind yourselves during the bad weather and have a good weekend.